Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to this pop-up with Process and Faith. My name is Sherry Kling, and I serve as Director of Process and Faith, which is a program of the Center for Process Studies. And we are a multi-faith center for relational spirituality. And so we try to do events from different perspectives. And this one tonight will be a process and open and relational perspective on God, power, and faith, which I'll say more about our speaker in just a moment. But I also wanted to mention we have another event coming up in July on the 13th, Monday the 13th, with a wonderful artist named Mary Jane Miller, who is an iconographer and has written a new book called Prayers for Mother Earth: Gratitude, Compassion, Repentance, and Guidance. And so her perspective will not be limited, I'm sure, to any one particular religious tradition, although it may have more Christian overtones. But this will be more about, again, Mother Earth and our relationship with the earth. Thanks, Jared, for putting that link in the chat. So if you'd like to RSVP for that, please go ahead and click on the link and do that, and you'll get the same information about that event. And we hope that you can join us for that one. But this evening, we are here to talk about the topic of made by love for love. As I mentioned, Reimagining God, Power, and Faith, which is the new book by Michael Rose. And he is here with us tonight to be our speaker. And Michael is a spiritual director, a grief specialist, and a theologian with 3 decades of experience accompanying people through faith, loss, and transformation. He has another book before this one called Becoming Love. And he's influenced both by open and relational theology and also the evolutionary vision of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who I also love. And many of us in the process community really appreciate Teilhard de Chardin's work because it's so friendly to a process and open and relational perspective. And Michael is from Alberta, Canada. And so with that, I'll just let Michael take it away and go from here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sherry. Thanks, Jared. Thanks, JD. So yeah, I do want to say thank you very much to Process and Faith and for Sherry for this opportunity. I'm pretty excited about it. Excited maybe with some sort of alchemy of anxiety, which probably pushes on my lever to speak too much, but we'll work on that every day in every way. I'm getting better and better. Anyways, I'm here to talk to you today about my latest book. It's called Made by Love for Love, Reimagining God, Power, and Faith in Light of Relentless Love. And I was asked on a podcast a couple weeks ago, why this book? And I told them, in lots of ways, this book and the one previous was really inspired by a series of kisses. And when I'm talking about kisses, I'm talking about divine kiss. I mean, that's kind of a mystical language, but just every once in a while, just some of these interesting experiences where there's some tangible sense of love out there in a deep and very intimate relational way. And so that caught my attention many years ago. In fact, this is the long-awaited follow-up to my 2012 book, Becoming Love, Avoiding Common Forms of Christian Insanity, which really was sharing with my sons, trying to help them understand the deconstruction that their pastor or father with ambitions of megachurch father going through this deconstruction, and how love just broke in such a really neat way, and began to pull the pins on the things that I was so darn certain about. And so it's just been this journey. But really, as I said, this book really did emerge from this wrestling with faith through suffering experiences that we've experienced as family, um, both intimately and also with close friends, but also wrestling with the world as we know it, with science, and with different spiritual voices, different experiences, and different interpretations. So if I had to share the big idea of this book, I think it would be, I'm pretty darn sure it would be, that love is the deepest reality of the cosmos, the deepest reality of who and what God is, and the best, I think, a darn good way forward towards wholeness for humanity. So where I start in the book, I start talking about a bit of the problem. I talk about a bit of the exodus that we're seeing within Western Christianity specifically. And and my experience walking alongside, not all of them, of course, but some of them, is that many of them are leaving not because they've lost faith, but the stories aren't big enough for them. They don't hold the depth, the size of their experience, what they know to be true of the world. Um, and they just, yeah, so in a sense it's like they've kind of outgrown it, so they're not leaving their Christian church homes um, out of rebellion or alienation or anything necessarily like that. Many describe having to move on to look in different areas as a matter of integrity in a way to be able to actually save their faith. So I thought that was kind of interesting for me, but I don't want to be trashing Christianity because for me, there has been lots of good things, lots of gifts through that. Um, I'll tell you that some of the best experiences I've had has been in the context of community. And when I'm talking about community, I'm really talking about faithful, forgiving friends, folks that you just go through life with, right? Through the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, I have some friends, one of them's online here with me today. Um, and for years we would get together with a couple other guys from the US and just connect, support, and encourage each other. And it was so rich for so long, just having that intimate, well, it was darn near like brothers for us. So some of my best experiences would come out of community, but some of my biggest wounds, some of my biggest lumps and scars have also come in community because it can be so darn messy, can it? I always joked that church would be amazing if it weren't for the people, but nonetheless. Um, But I think as we dig more and more into this, I just think that some of our inherited images of God are too small, particularly in light of evolution, suffering, human development, and this person of Jesus. I think that we really, really need new stories, not just for Christian folks, but I think for humanity as a whole. Some folks push back and it's stories where I live. I mean, we live like on the buckle of the Bible Belt here in the corncob city, and my good reformed friends, God bless them, they're not interested in story, they're interested in the truth. So for those of you who don't speak anglicized Dutch, that's truth. So lots of great, wonderful Dutch friends here, but they like to talk about the truth. And it took me a couple listens to it to figure out that that's actually what they were saying and not an intestinal issue that was going on. But what I realized is that stories are just so important. They're so important. Um, and I think that we are so pickled in our stories, our cultural stories, our faith stories, our worldviews, all these stories that we seem to be like fish in a fishbowl, right? That's what we know. That's the way that we understand things are. And we don't question it. We just figure that that's kind of the way it is. And that's the way that we need to exist. And that's great when things are going fine, not so great when they're not. So, for example, if we've got like a might makes right kind of story, a domination story, and that's the deepest story, then domination, that becomes the normal. That's what gets embodied within our worldview, right? So then domination, heavy-handedness, power, ends justify the means type things, those kind of things, winning at all costs, part of that domination complex, right? Begin to get rewarded and celebrated, right? And then they self-propagate. So I think the stories really are important. And what I'm interested in is what kind of people do our stories produce? Um, and so I guess kind of as a clunky transition, that with love really kind of being fascinating to me, impactful for me, and the way that I've chose to live my life and trying to engage the world. What would it look like if love was more central than we possibly imagined? And so, in the middle of all this, I stumbled on French Jesuit Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he was kind of an interesting character in lots of ways. He was always running amok with his ecclesiastical oversight. He just saw the world differently. And what his big thing was is he was looking for ways that faith and science, faith and evolution could be held together in a way that makes sense so that both could have integrity together. Anyways, well, I could talk about Teilhard forever, but some of his big ideas that I wanted to share is just this idea, and this belief, this was just so important to me, was that the universe is still becoming. And this had implications for me, because if the universe is still becoming, that means that there's still potential, there's still possibilities and creativity, and therefore, for me, hope for something more and something better. Teilhard looked at the universe, he looked at the world, and what the pattern that he saw was things that were very, very simple, rudimentary, coming together with other like things, and coming together in such a way that they became something new. And through this process of complexity, slowly over time emerged consciousness. And what he posits, and what I believe we've in some ways experience, is from that consciousness becomes communion. Not only a deeper communion with one another, but a deeper communion with God, deeper community with the planet and all the people that we share the planet with. The other idea, and why this is important to me, is that all these individual wholes, in a sense, come together to make something more than their sum parts. So those of you who have a Christian background, you remember the New Testament story about body having many parts, right? And the foot can't say to the ear, I don't need you, yada, yada, yada. But the point is that all these individual things, all these cells, all these parts come together in such a way to form something unique. So in a really interesting way, for example, humans are more than their parts, right? We talk about consciousness, we talk about our subjective experience and so forth. We talk about the way that we show up in the world, which is a lot different than my left toe could on its own. So I need my left toe to get there. But my left toe in and of itself is not the whole story, right? So this whole becoming more than the sum parts is really kind of fascinating as part of this complexity aspect that Teilhard was talking about. Teilhard was more of a fan of Henri Bergson, more than, say, Darwin, and Bergson's ideas around evolution. And Bergson, not unlike Teilhard, like this whole idea of this élan vital, this vital impulse. And I think for a long time, many of us have just defaulted to this cosmic idea that somehow God is omnipotent, coercive, all powerful, and in the context of that story, we can view that vital impulse, that call, that heartbeat within things as coercive. But I don't think we need to do that, as I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to here shortly. But the whole idea for them, particularly for Teilhard, was that vital impulse was pulse of love, right? Now that pulse of love is culturally and contextually appropriate. So for example, various molecules come together, and maybe they come together through magnetic forces or nuclear forces or whatever we want to do that they bring together. So there is that attraction, which I kind of come to see as attraction or eros, which is a kind of love. It's a very rudimentary, basic kind of love. And then I see that as things complexify, as things get more and more complex, so increases our ability and our capacity to love well. So I don't think that the human capacity for love is a glitch. I think that it's very consistent with the flow, with the lure within the cosmos itself. I think that love, I would say in the book and argue quite a bit, that love is very much the logos, the organizing principle on which we're being inspired and called towards. Teilhard would also talk about ideas like divine milieu. He'd talk about the cosmos, and this is kind of my word because I can be a little strange, but it really strikes me as in this divine milieu, it's like we're being pickled in love, right? So I don't know about you, but my mom and dad used to make sweet pickles, and they go and they get these little cukes. I'm sure you all know what that's like. You chop them all up, and then you put them in the brine. You leave them in the crock pot for a long time, and slowly these cucumbers, in a sense, are transformed by the brine, by the milieu, by the context in which they're in. And so my hope is that as we see love that is shot through the entire cosmos, that its work is pickling everything within that cosmos, including us, including Sherry's cats and her dog, pickling them in divine love. The other thing that I think is really interesting with Teilhard, just not throwaway lines, but that God creates things that create themselves. So very much this evolutionary thing that allows evolution and the law-like regularities to do what it is they do in the context of this greater milieu. One of the things that I like to say too when I'm talking about Teilhard, because sometimes folks like to take a hit job on him, but Teilhard spends a lot of time talking about unity, that there's this convergence, that in the fullness of time there will be this just super saturated union, right? And unfortunately, that's often been interpreted in a sense of homogeneity, that same, that union is same. But Teilhard is very, very specific, that authentic, genuine union differs, that we become the fullness of who we were created to be in the context of a community of unique things. So I think that picture is really, really quite beautiful. So as I'm thinking about Teilhard, I keep getting this nagging sense. Well, it's not so nagging. Teilhard's pretty direct in saying it, that love is woven into reality. And so if this is the case, what does it say about God? What does that say about us? So then I stumbled around and came across this guy, Thomas Jay Oord. And I know he spoke on one of these last month. And for me, in lots of ways, I think Oord was extraordinarily helpful. I think in ways Oord helped give me a schema that made sense, that was rugged enough to to hang my questions, my ponderings, my what about this kind of stuff. Um, but in a real sense, it was more of a formal introduction to open relational theology and process. And I've said it publicly, and I continue to say it again. I am suspect as to whether I would be a person of faith without process thinking and open relational theology. I think that the tools that I had before, I just couldn't make slot B fit into, I don't know, tab B. I couldn't make those things. I couldn't make those circles square. But one of the things that I like, lots I like about Tom, but his whole bit about love. And so he's written copious amounts of things on love. And that was very helpful to me as I'm wrestling through what love is. Like surely we're not talking about the same kind of love that I have for au gratin potato chips. Because I love au gratin potato chips, but my love for my wife is a whole bunch different. And I'm glad she's upstairs because I'm not sure that she would appreciate that. But I know she would probably be relieved. But what I liked is that where we've got Teilhard, he's got this great big huge vision, this great big vision of love. What I like about Oord is that he helps land that love in a less abstract, less overwhelming kind of way. And I mean, we can get into this and we can argue about definitions. Some people say trying to define love is like trying to rope the wind and so forth. But I still think that we can say some things about love that can help put some terra firma under our feet to help us think in better ways. And so I really, really like and continue to hang on to Oord's definition of love. And he defines it as acting intentionally in relational response to God and others to promote overall well-being. And out of that, the next idea was this whole essential kenosis thing, which is really one of the areas that I start with this book. But it's not just that God loves; it's this whole idea that God is love, God's very nature, God's character, the essence, the being of who God is love. And for me, that was wild. And in a sense, it provided a kind of like a chiropractic adjustment, because what it did is it helped me move love to center, and that reorients all the other aspects, all the other attributes of God. So one of the pictures that I like to use, maybe you guys are city folks, but one of the pictures I like is like those old wagon wheels. Maybe you've seen one on a John Wayne flicker or something, right? But you've got that hub in the middle, and out from that hub go the spokes to the rim. And so I envision that at the center is love, and that God's justice, God's holiness or whole-makingness, God's goodness, God's wrath, God's whatever, are all surround that, but they're influenced and shaped by that hub, which is the love of God. While I also like center language, love being in the center instead of first, is because I think it gets rid of an unfortunate hierarchy where we're jockeying for position. I love having coffee debates with my local friends here, right? And they want to talk about God's glory and they want to talk about God's justice as primary attributes. And so we have this kind of fun back and forth debate. But for me, and where I'm at, I'm seeing that if this is essential kenosis is true, if God is love, if God cannot not love, using those double negatives, I guess, that there's something really impactful there for me. So then part of that as it rolls out is that love and coercion are not compatible. And I think that Jesus reveals that relationally, um, rather than controlling power. I think, that for me, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, whatever terms we want, I think that Jesus, in the best sense, um, is the best picture in all of Scripture, um, of the nature, the character, um, of who God is, in some sort of a way that us humans can kind of get our little melons around it. Um, but through that, I just see that love and sorry, um, that it's that uncoercion, that uncontrolling aspect, it was really important to me. And so there's been a few things in my life where this has really come home to roost. So back in my more fundamentalist days, um, we were at a local church here in our little town, and a couple weeks after Columbine, we had a school shooting here. And one of the kids, there were three boys shot. One died, and the fella died. His name was Jason. He was 17 years old. He was in our youth group, and his parents were the parish priests of our local Anglican Episcopal Church. Um, so it just hit like a ton of bricks. Now you need to understand, and this isn't a poke at my American friends, but that sort of stuff just doesn't happen very often here in Canada. So to have something like that happen here, just to, just in the fresh shadow of Columbine, was absolutely horrific. And in the shadow of all that was, as you would expect, all sorts of pontifications and prognostications of what the heck happened. God, where were you? I mean, this is a preacher's kid, right? He's 17-year-old, does anyone know where the love of God goes? When a broken young man comes walking into a school with a rifle shoved down his pant leg, right? But people are trying to make sense of that, and they're going to their beloved faith stories that they know. And some of the stories that people would come with to try and bring consolation were brutal, right? They'd go to the parents and say, well, at least you have four other children. Or they would say, come up with some story of, well, this was the demon Moroni, I'm not kidding, assaulting a Christian minister, persecuting the cross of Christ. So this is a total spiritual battle. And so there was all these kinds of stories. Probably the most prevalent was, well, God needed another angel. I'm not kidding. People actually say that. Other ones are, God, this was part of God's plan, yada, yada, yada. And I won't speak for anybody else, but I'll speak for me that there's that brain twist for me that went on. So I've got this sense, this emerging sense that God is love, but how the heck does this make sense with a 17-year-old boy lying dead in our local hospital? It just didn't make sense. And so things just keep getting pulled apart. So these sort of things really matter. They really matter. I could tell you the story of my wife's cancer journey. I mean, I can still, as fresh as the day it happened, remember hearing that diagnosis. The doctor on speakerphone, and it's like, what the heck, And then God bless them, all the well-meaning friends of Job, saying, "See, Mike, you're a heretic, and you should come back to the local church and repent," and yada yada yada. Not kidding. People said that, And so I got to this place where I was just like, holy crap, man, this is a monster God that these people are talking about, but that's just not the God I know. So maybe I am a heretic. Maybe my cheese has slid off my cracker. I don't know. But I think our stories continue to be important. I think that the way that we understand love and the way that God loves, that God doesn't cause calamity that way. God doesn't bring suffering, but God is at work. God is at work trying to squeeze as much well-being out of those crappy, horrible things that God didn't even want in the first place. So as we're jumping ahead, I just got to skate here. But as I'm beginning to look at some of our stories, I begin to think about salvation. And I used to think of salvation, maybe all used to too, is this whole idea that whenever it's the time and the divine referee or lifeguard blows the whistle and everybody gets out of the pool, that, if I say the prayer right, if I live reasonably well, if I have right doctrine, then I'll be going to live in heaven. Be rescued out of this terrible, horrible earth that's fallen, and I'll be liberated from this nasty, terrible body. But I'm seeing through love just something different. And so when I think about salvation, what I'm thinking about is the salvation that we're looking for, the salvation that we've been longing for, is how do we love? That we're saved by learning to love well. And I'm not talking about works righteousness. Let me put it this way, it's probably better. We're saved by becoming love, right? And it's not necessarily that there's a finish line and that you have to reach a certain standard, because God meets us, I think, where we're at. Love meets us where we're at and calls us and lures us forward into the vast possibilities that exist within the context of law-like regularity and choices we've made and choices that other people make. But I'm really seeing that the salvation is that if we just learn how to love, this is probably ignoble, but maybe most of you are old enough to remember Ozzy Osbourne. And one of his solo albums, he had this song called Crazy Train. It was really quite popular, but it's got a line in it that just keeps resonating very often. And it's this whole idea that if we could learn how to love and forget how to hate. And for me, I think that that's the call for humanity, that the salvation is that together we learn to love in the context of community, in the context of countries, in the context of a planet, in the context of interrelated species, in the context of cosmos itself, that all in all will be made love. So then we can talk about, here's the thing. Y'all remember that bit about partakers of the divine nature? I believe that's in Philippians 2, right? But this invitation into the divine nature. And what I'm arguing is that if the divine nature is indeed love, that's the nature we're being invited into, is to learn how to be lovers, is to learn how to become love. So therefore, we talk about sin, and I think sin is real, but I think sin is more a resistance to love. So it sounds simple, but the cure for sin is love. I don't think it's punishment. I don't think it's estrangement. I don't think it's shame. I think it's us waking up, us being stirred to our senses, to realize that what we've done is horrible. What we've done is hurt other people, hurt other things, other species. We've inhibited overall flourishing with greed, with selfishness, and so forth. And I think this idea is so powerful that when we come to our senses, we can have that true sense of repentance. It's like, what the heck have I done? I've got to stop. I've got to change. I've got to be I got to make some change in my life, and I got to do the work to deal with the stuff that's disordered in myself, right? There's a fella, McDonald, what is it, John McDonald? Oh, I can't think of his first name. Anyways, he had this beautiful picture, and he's talking about justice, and he's arguing that punishment doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't guarantee justice, because he argues that if that's the case, then what we're saying is that justice is somehow served by the suffering that punishment provides. But MacDonald carries on to say, but when we come to our senses, when our heart is cracked open by love, by circumstances, and we see that our choices have been hurtful and harmful, we change, our heart changes. And the way he puts this is really neat. He says, because then it makes us our own sin's executioner. And I think, wow, that's beautiful. That we're loved into wholeness. We're loved into well-being. We're loved into love. I have no idea what time it is, but
It's
my
about
big question.
8:37. So if you want
Okay,
to, Michael, take another couple minutes and then we'll go to
yeah,
discussion. That'd be
yeah.
great.
Basically, I guess my big angst in this is what kind of people are we becoming? And I don't care really what stories, what faith stories per se. The question is still the same. What kind of people are we becoming? And I think that's important. Um, and so what is the fruit of the things that we believe? Do we think might makes right? Do we think that exploitation and cannibalistic consumption puts you somehow more blessed or what have you? I'm just not convinced that those are good stories. But what I am convinced are good stories are people with courage, people with creativity, people with compassion, folks that will um, lay their lives down for their friends, folks that will stand up and go and rally in defense of their neighbors who are being rounded up and carted off. I'm talking about folks that I mean, even in simple little ways, my goodness, every single small action of love, right, is building this cosmos of love. It makes a difference, right? We always like to focus on the big stuff, but I tell you what, the easy little stuff, doing it more consistently is way easier to sustain. So I just one question or what do our stories produce in us? So in closing, it's just I really believe that love is more original than sin. Love is more fundamental than domination. I think that love is stronger than might makes right. I think that love is more enduring than fear. Um, I think the larger story is that love is at the core and is the call and is the woo and is the lure and is the source of our creativity and beauty. So what I suspect is that we are made by love and we're sustained by that love and we're called toward love. And I think the future of humanity may very well depend on us learning to participate more deeply in that divine nature or learning to love well together. So thanks for that. It was kind of a fire hose, but yeah, interested in your thoughts, your questions. You can throw rotten fruit. You can hold up your pet to the camera. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mike. That was really great. Really appreciate your sharing that journey that you took of how not only how the book came to be, but how you came to these perspectives. And just two things that stood out for me. One was I loved your definition of community as faithful, forgiving friends.
Mhm.
I think that's really, really beautiful. And just want to acknowledge I too feel that there's such importance in recognizing the connection between the stories we tell ourselves and about the world,
Mhm.
and how they then become embodied as to who we become and how we treat other people and how we treat ourselves. And that is so important to recognize that often what we're seeing in our lives is because of a story we're telling ourselves.
Mhm.
And sometimes we really need to change the story in order to see something different. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's bang on, and I'm grinning, probably grinning inside. But there's a footnote in my book to you because you were kind enough to give me some insight into one of the ideas that Jung had, right? And it's this whole idea that until we awake, right, we're going to continue to live as we always lived and think
right,
it's fate, right?
right,
And it
right.
just renders us so powerful or so powerless, right? And that's
Yes,
what I love about the uncontrolling aspect is that we got to have skin in the game. We have some some agency to be able to choose and to
yeah,
step out some of those stories.
yeah, for sure. Well, let's go to some questions. I see Olga has her hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I I think the same way. Everything you've said is exactly what I feel.
Wow,
And
great.
I have no problem loving if someone hurts me personally. What
Mhm,
I cannot love is when I witness such uh, injustice and unfairness.
mhm.
Love is not coming out of me. I don't want to take this conversation any further than this, but let's just say that I wrote an email to Michelle Obama. Um, just it had to come from my heart because I couldn't continue with the day today if I didn't do that.
Yeah,
Whether it's through her website, so whether she answers or reads it or not, it made me feel less hatred at that moment.
mhm.
So I don't know what that means, but that's the only problem I have is I can't. I hate when I see injustice.
Yeah,
How do you
yeah, yeah,
handle that?
yeah. I hate when I see injustice too. Um, I hear you. And I don't think that we're called to love injustice, right? I think that, well, I'll speak about me. When I do small, hurtful things, um, I do so out of my own brokenness, those my own marks and twists on my own psyche. Um, and I've gone to battle with people over them and felt a little self-righteous about doing it. Um, but what has consistently healed my heart is people still choosing to love me. So that doesn't mean they tolerate or explain or rationalize the things I do. They have good, hard, fast boundaries. But I'm thinking about a couple. It was my cousin. He and his husband. Um, they loved me when I was the biggest homophobe, um, anti-queer. Well, it wasn't the biggest, but I was pretty good at it. Um, and they kept making space for me to be kind and leaving the door open. And when I
Mm,
finally had that come to Jesus, if you will, when I opened up around this idea of love and how God sees people, all people, um, that left the door open for me to go through a veil of tears, weep and snotty nose, the whole thing. But you know what? They didn't lecture me. They just loved me, and
wow.
it broke my heart, and it's changed me. Um, so I'm not asking you to hate injustice because I couldn't do that, right? I don't think God um, um, loves injustice. I don't think God likes anything that impinges flourishing. So I want to encourage you and what you said about just even what you said about responding and how you responded to that anger that you are feeling, that very legitimate, honest feel emotions that you're having. I think that in itself was genuinely loving, because there's a whole host of really destructive ways you could have done that. And it seems to me that in that act of beauty and writing and reaching out and communicating and sharing, singing a song, whatever, that is you stretching towards love. So for me, you're awesome. Sincerely. That's the hard work of loving.
Yeah.
Good on you, Olga. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga. I see Carl has his hand raised. Carl, can you unmute and ask your question or make your comment?
Hi, Carl.
Sure. Yeah, I actually have like three, but I'll keep them short. The first one is, can you have a story without metaphor or truth? Right. So so to me, it seems like they're go hand in hand. So I'll save you for that one. The second one is your love of potato chips. I think that is love. I mean, all things are relational, and contextual. So your love for your partner is different, but your love for chips are still is love. Still is love, because my love for a rock is still love, right? It's contextually different, but it's still love. So comment on that. And the third is, I think you tried to pull away from some kind of substance talk when you talked about salvation or atonement. And to me, I like what you said, but it's, to me, when you're in a relationship with love, that is salvation. That is atonement. That is, and it's finished. It's not incomplete, or that you have to be more loving or move to a thing. Now you can deepen, but that salvation is already just in the relationship itself, is the atonement or salvation. It's not like, well, I didn't really love this today, so I'm not quite there.
No,
yeah. And I think you pulled away from that. But to me, when we talk about, sometimes we talk about it as substance kind of thing. And to me, sin is the absence of relationship with love. And whenever you step away from it, so it's not substantive, it's relational, to stay with the thing. So those are my comments and thoughts.
Yeah, I do have some very strong feelings about au gratin potato chips. But you're right. Yeah, they're very different. Contextual makes total sense. Totally agree with you. So you use the word deepen when we're talking about love. I just use the word becoming. So becoming is that deepening of relationship with love. And I think that's the call, that's the lure for us. And yes. I think that just to even repeat what you said, is that to love is salvation. I don't think I put words in your mouth that are truncated in. So that's about all I can remember. But yeah, I really appreciate what you had to say.
Well, the first one was the relationship between metaphor, truth to story.
Oh yeah, you know what? I'm yeah. For whatever reason, that's making me think about this whole idea of free will and limited free will, and some of the discussions I'm having with some friends around it. Here's where I'm at today. I think that in a very real sense, art, stories, metaphors are truth, right? I'm not sure that they're the truth, but they're a picture, they're a representation of that truth. And I think that we can wipe the sleep out of our eyes. I think we can get some spectacles to maybe adjust and help us see better. But I always keep coming back to this I think it's a Buddhist story about these blind monks that come across an elephant, right? And one grabs the trunk and one grabs the tail and one grabs the leg. And they're all experiencing the same elephant. But their experiences are very different. So the stories they're telling are very different. So the stories about truth from what they're experiencing. And for me, I really want to make a whole bunch of space for a bunch of stories. And like I said, what I'm really interested in is what's the fruit of the story, right? Like I don't know, you trying to pick something that's safe. You could be like a complete Dallas Cowboys fan and still not be a jerk. You know what I mean? You could still be our prime minister, and yeah, I'm really muddling the point. I'm just trying to say that I think our stories are important, and what they produce in us. Are they producing beauty? Are they producing hope? Are they producing compassion and kindness and mercy? Do they have a spine, where they stand up and say, love you to bits, but no, we're not going there. I'm not going to let you do that, kind of thing. So I think I've beaten that horse to death. But again, great questions. It's just where I'm at right now. God only knows tomorrow.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other questions out there from those of you who are listening? If so, either raise your virtual hand, or if you can't find that button, you can just unmute and shout out, and we'll hear you. Michael, I did think of a question, and it's not this isn't a question that has a right and wrong answer. So it does. I'm just thinking, as you're talking about salvation and becoming love, and sin as resistance to love. I guess I want to play a little bit with is it the word becoming, and I love the word becoming, kind of suggests a progression, a development, a movement forward.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking with equal validity of the idea of restoration. Restoration to love.
Yeah.
That maybe there's also an aspect of this where we're basically returning home to what was always true. Not just becoming something that we weren't before. And I want to say that, like I said, it's not either or in my mind. There's a way in which it's both. Yeah. But I just was curious about what your thoughts might be on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think probably where I'm coming from is my Teilhard influence, right? And so I struggle with the story that starts with original badness, or even one of original goodness in a sense, right? That I think from an evolution perspective through that great big long journey, it's been a story of becoming. And I think that even as I look through the scriptures, I see the story of the way that people interacted with this God they stumbled into through the desert, and the way that progressed, the way that their story matured and changed and morphed over and throughout the arc of the narrative to what we're experiencing today. So I think what you said is absolutely true right from the very beginning, when we were just a glimpse in a salamander's eye. That we were loved, and we were loved perfectly and beautifully and completed. I think the reality too, I think in some of the original stories, we're dealing with our sense of estrangement, our disconnection from that love, and just that becoming, that learning to get an inkling, to a hunch, a nudge um, to a kiss or whatever, that draws us along um, in our human development.
Yeah,
So
that's great. Thank you. Carl, you want to jump back back into the pool?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
excellent,
I don't
good.
mean to operate, but I've been arguing with my friends about the Adam and Eve story, and
Yeah.
that the eating of the fruit was not the sin. The sin was hiding from God, and you use the word awakening. And so, to Sherry's point, I think when we hide from love, we're hiding from ourselves, from each other, and from God. And maybe that's
Beautiful.
kind of a Trinity talk, but to me, it's about hiding from that relationship. It's not a movement towards love. It's like Sherry said, it's a recognizing, an awakening to what we incarnation are. And
Beautiful.
so I think N.T. Wright talks about, justification by faith. You're part of the family, and you work that out, or you live that
Yeah.
out, as you talked
Yeah.
about, as to doing that. And so to me, baptism is not a getting into the membership. It's recognizing that I was created a part of the family,
Yeah.
and all of the universe. So I like the becoming as well. And I think Greek has a verb that says it happened and it continues to happen. And
Ah,
so maybe that is what we when we experience that experience of love, when we first taste it or smell it or experience it, it's there and it happens, and then we continue, that we move and get that becoming that Michael is talking about. And I hate to jump into that, but I just think
No, you're
that's
totally fine. I'm glad you did.
kind of thing, because and like I said, talking about your stories, right? The original sin thing is a foundational metaphor for a lot of stories that we
Yeah.
have, or I have rejected, and it sounds like what you've rejected in that thing. And so renaming that story on that, and I got there was a video from a rabbi who talked about that story and its kind of literary makeup, that the point of the story is the hidingness from God, and the clothing of ourselves. We clothe ourselves from love. So anyway, I keep talking, but that's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so
that's
good.
great. Yeah. Well, I see it's 8:59, and so I think we need to bring this event to a close. But let's give Michael a big hand if you want to wave your hands or clap your
Thank you.
hands. But thank you, Michael. That was really really great, and I'm so glad you came and shared this with us tonight. I
Oh,
think it's
thanks.
very important for us to have these conversations, really.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of lonely up here in 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 the Corn Cob City, so it's kind of nice to be with other people who are asking the same sorts of questions and wondering, and
Yeah.
folks that you don't know really well who will just look at you and say, "Ah, you're full of crap," and that's good too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, very good. And speaking of being with people who are like-minded, I just want to put a plug in for OrtCon. We
mhm.
were talking about this in the green room, I guess, before we came into the presentation. Thomas Jay Oord, that Michael referenced in his new book as A Systematic Theology of Love, has been organizing a wonderful conference each year out in the Tetons. Near Jackson Hole, and called OrtCon, Open and Relational Theology Conference. And Michael will be there, and I'll be there, and it's a really great event. So if that's something that interests you, check that out. I'll also be going to Theology Beer Camp for the first time this year in October out in Kansas City. It's a Trip Fuller homebrewed Christianity based event, but Tom Oord again will be organizing a pre-conference day with a lot of people in the open and relational and process world, and I'll be there with a panel of people talking about the book Renewing Faith. So anyway, lots of neat things coming up if you're interested in being part of communities where these kinds of conversations are being had.
Yeah.
And certainly I know it's not easy for everyone to travel to things like that, but if that is something you can do, I would really encourage you to do that. Find your people, be among your people wherever you can.
Mhm.
And if you
Amen.
can't do it in person, then come be with us online
Mhm.
as much as you can, because we have lovely offerings in learning circles. There's a Christian process explorations group that meets once a month on Monday
Mm.
evenings. There's a Buddhist group that meets on Wednesdays, a Christian leadership group that meets on Wednesdays during the day. Terry Goddard does some book discussion groups. So if you go to the Process and Faith website, thank you, Jared. The link is there. You can see all the offerings we have, and we invite you to be part of this community for sure. All
Yeah.
right.
So
Thank
good.
you again, and thank you to
Thank you.
Jared and to JD for being
JD.
our background Zoom support tech team.
Yeah.
And we will see you at the next event.
All right. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.